set my teammates up, but also like it's nice that they are calling fouls. It does get a little physical sometimes, so I think there's a fine balance, and players will figure it out. But overall, I think the refs have done a really good job. So got to give credit to them too.
That was really nice.
I mean it.
Hey, Caitlin, I got one for you.
Yeah.
Apparently, they adjusted the box score from last game to give you two
Yeah.
more assists, which gave you the
Yeah, I heard
career
about that.
record for most 20
Yeah.
10 assist games.
Yeah.
Have you ever broken a record 2 days later? And does this
I think that might be
mean,
a first. That's a good point.
and does this one mean anything particular to you?
We witnessed Caitlin Clark once again cementing herself as the demon of the did. The highest ranks of professional basketball secretly agree to freeze out their own golden goose. Or was this icy post-game moment the ultimate display of a deeply rooted unspoken jealousy? Imagine stepping onto the hardwood, carrying the weight of a franchise, an entire league, and millions of new fans on your shoulders, only to absolutely dismantle one of the most terrifying defensive teams in the country. You drop a staggering 32 points, sink impossible shots from another zip code, and orchestrate an offensive clinic that leaves the opposing roster completely shattered. The final buzzer sounds, the crowd is in an absolute frenzy, and you walk toward the opposing sideline expecting the standard professional acknowledgement of a game well played. Instead, you are met with a chilling, deliberate silence that speaks louder than any roaring arena ever could. This wasn't just a simple oversight or coach lost in the heat of the moment. When Connecticut Sun head coach Stephanie White seemingly ignored Caitlin Clark's historic, jaw-dropping masterclass, it sent a massive shockwave through the sports world, pulling back the curtain on a much darker, behind-the-scenes war brewing in the locker rooms. The cameras caught the cold shoulder. The fans immediately took to social media to piece together the clues, and the whispers of a coordinated effort to humble the rookie phenomenon exploded into a deafening roar. But to truly understand why a respected veteran coach would turn a blind eye to pure greatness, we have to look past the box score and dive into the messy, complicated, and fiercely guarded hierarchy of a league that is being dragged into the future against its will. The truth behind that post-game snub is far more intense than anyone realized, and it exposes a level of psychological warfare that has been bubbling under the surface since the moment Caitlin was drafted. To grasp the sheer magnitude of this disrespect, you first have to understand the absolute devastation of the performance itself, because this wasn't just a regular Tuesday night stat padding session. This was a surgical, terrifying display of offensive dominance against a Connecticut Sun team that prides itself on being the most physical, gritty, music, and defensively suffocating squad in the entire association. The Sun are built to break rookies, operating with a defensive scheme that revolves around pure intimidation, relentless full-court pressure, and forcing young guards to question every single decision they make on the floor. Their perimeter defenders are known for getting under the skin of their opponents, using every trick in the veteran playbook to disrupt the flow of the game. Yet, Caitlin stepped onto the court and completely dismantled their entire defensive identity piece by piece. She was pulling up from the logo with a hand right in her face, threading impossible needle-like passes through aggressive double teams, and controlling the pace of the game with the swagger of a 10-year veteran who had seen it all before. Every time the Sun tried to mount a desperate comeback or trap her in the corner to force a turnover, she answered with a back-breaking three-pointer that sucked the absolute life out of the building. Music, she didn't just beat them on the scoreboard, she demoralized them mentally. Music, putting on a generational basketball clinic that forced every single person in the arena to recognize her unparalleled skill level. When a player does that to your heavily praised defense, the natural reaction from a great basketball mind is usually a begrudging nod of respect or a quick word of praise during the post-game presser. But that wasn't the whole story, because what happened the second the clock hit zero revealed a completely different, deeply unsettling narrative that no one was prepared for. The handshake line is a sacred tradition in the sport of basketball, acting as a brief, mandatory moment where the intense hostility of competition is momentarily paused for a mutual show of respect. But as Caitlin made her way through the line, completely drenched in sweat and coming off a career-defining performance that had the entire sports world buzzing, the interaction with the Suns' coaching staff felt like walking straight into a meat freezer. Stephanie White's body language was incredibly stiff, her gaze completely averted to the side, and the brush-by was so incredibly brief and dismissive that it immediately caught the attention of every single fan analyzing the live broadcast. There was no customary pat on the back, no quiet words of encouragement whispered into the rookie's ear, and absolutely no public acknowledgement of the historic beatdown that had just taken place on her own floor. This frosty, calculated demeanor extended straight into the post-game press conference, where the much deeper than a single game, tying directly into the complicated history of the state where they both built their names. To truly crack the code of this icy interaction, you have to dig into the complicated, overlapping ghosts of Indiana basketball past, which adds an incredible. She played for the Indiana Fever. She coached the Indiana Fever to the WNBA finals. And for a very long time, her name was completely synonymous with women's professional basketball in that specific region. She helped build the gritty, hard-nosed, blue-collar culture of the franchise from the ground up and rightfully earned her place as a beloved figure in the state's rich sports history. But then, almost overnight, a 22-year-old kid from Iowa arrived with a lethal jump shot and completely rewrote the record books, instantly becoming the most famous athlete the state had seen since the Peyton Manning era. The level of worldwide stardom Caitlin achieved in her first few months fundamentally eclipsed the decades of blood, sweat, and tears that veterans like White had poured into the very same franchise. Every single highway billboard, every sold-out arena, and every glowing national media narrative was suddenly centered entirely around this rookie. While the pioneers who physically built the foundation dynamic that is impossible to ignore. Imagine spending your entire adult life building a house brick by brick, only for someone else to walk through the front door and immediately be handed the keys to the kingdom by the entire world. Whether it's conscious or subconscious, that level of instantaneous overshadowing breeds a quiet, bitter resentment that is incredibly difficult to mask. The refusal to praise the 32-point masterclass wasn't just about being a sore loser after a tough game. It was a subtle, unspoken act of rebellion against the overwhelming narrative that Caitlin Clark is the sole savior of Indiana basketball. But as deep as this regional rivalry goes, this single moment of blatant disrespect actually exposed a much wider, league-spanning conspiracy of silence that threatens to tear the locker rooms apart. This icy reception wasn't an isolated incident born out of regional jealousy. It was merely a highly visible set been swirling about private veteran group chats and closed-door conversations where players and coaches allegedly formed an unspoken pact. The whispers suggested there was a coordinated agreement to never publicly feed into the Clark effect, effectively starving the media of the sound bites they so desperately craved. The old guard of the WNBA felt that the mainstream media had prematurely crowned the rookie before she had even taken a single professional dribble, and they were determined to make her earn every single ounce of respect. Music, the absolute hard way. Whenever analysts or reporters would ask opposing coaches about Caitlin's undeniable impact on the game's viewership, they would routinely use heavily coded language referring to the massive reality check coming her way or constantly emphasizing that one single player doesn't make an entire league. They actively and stubbornly refused to validate her historic scoring nights, her record-breaking assist numbers, or the undeniable fact that she was single-handedly drawing millions of new eyeballs to their often overlooked product. The 32-point masterclass against the Sun was the ultimate stress test of this unspoken veteran. Packed, it was a performance so undeniable, so perfectly executed against elite competition, that continuing to ignore it bordered lined on pure, unadulterated delusion. Yet, the stubborn refusal to give credit persisted despite the overwhelming evidence on the scoreboard. The veterans were holding the line at all costs, choosing awkward silence over graceful surrender, terrified that admitting her greatness would mean admitting that their era was officially coming to a close. But this intense psychological warfare didn't just stay neatly confined to the press conference podiums. It spilled violently onto the court in ways that tested the rookies' literal survival instincts. When the ultimate authority figures in a professional league flat out refused to respect equal and beyond standard basketball plays, opposing players weren't just playing hard, competitive defense. They were laying devastating blindside screens, delivering blatant cheap shots away from the ball, and executing hard targets that heavily bordered on reckless endangerment. The unspoken message delivered through elbows and hip checks was crystal clear. If the coaches aren't going to praise, and meticulously designed to rattle her cage music and test her temper, every single time she aggressively drove the lane, she was met with a literal wall of hostile style contact that rarely drew. Whistle from the officials. The refusal of coaches to speak out carrying the burden of actually protecting her on the hardwood, even with the physical bruising escalating every week. A sinister underlying campaign was being waged off the court that revealed the ultimate jaw-dropping hypocrisy of the old guard. The most staggering, mind-boggling aspect of this entire silent treatment phenomenon is the absolute financial disconnect between the veterans' bitter attitudes and their rapidly growing bank accounts. For 25 long, grueling years, the league struggled mightily to gain any sort of mainstream traction or financial stability. Players constantly and rightfully begged for basic professional amenities like chartered flights, better baseline pay, larger arenas, and primetime television slots instead of being relegated to obscure streaming networks. They fought a massive, grueling, uphill battle for cultural relevance, only to see a massive, unprecedented wave of cash and global attention crash onto their shores, the exact second Caitlin Clark's name was called at the draft podium. Almost overnight, opposing teams were upgrading their venues to massive NBA-sized arenas just to accommodate the insane ticket demand when she came to town. Major television networks were suddenly breaking decades-old viewership records, pulling in millions of viewers for regular season afternoon games. The luxurious charter flights that were once considered a laughable pipe dream suddenly became a league-wide, fully funded reality. Yet, the very people directly cashing in on this massive financial explosion were the exact same ones giving the icy cold shoulder in the post-game handshake lines. The cognitive dissonance required to maintain this stance is absolutely wild to witness. They are deeply, visibly resentful of the blinding spotlight she commands, but they are more than happy to enjoy the luxurious shade provided by the massive financial tree she just planted in their backyard. This creates a deeply toxic, highly contradictory environment music, where players and coaches are simultaneously trying to destroy her public narrative while secretly praying she stays healthy enough to keep the massive ticket sales booming. Downplaying a historic 32-point performance while playing in front of a sold-out crowd that literally only showed up to see the very player you are actively ignoring is a masterclass in total denial. What absolutely no one anticipated, however, was how the young rookie would strategically strike back against this unprecedented, suffocating wave of hostility. If the established veterans truly thought their icy stares, physical hits, and coordinated media silence would mentally break the young star and send her running for the hills, they severely miscalculated the unique psychological makeup of Caitlin Clark. Most highly touted rookies facing this level of coordinated pressure and outright bullying would eventually crumble under the immense weight of the moment. They would start loudly complaining to the media about the lack of calls, whining to the referees after every possession, or aggressively subtweeting their deep frustrations after a particularly tough loss. But Caitlin operates on an entirely different, almost robotic, competitive frequency that completely baffles her critics. Her immediate response to the blatant disrespect, the coaching snubs, and the hard, borderline dirty fouls is utterly terrifying to her doubters. She just gets better. She doesn't beg for Stephanie White's validation. She doesn't ask the veteran players to like her, and she certainly doesn't apologize for stealing their spotlight. Instead, she ruthlessly channels every single ounce of that disrespect directly into her shooting stroke. When they ignore her, she simply pushes the pace faster and leaves them in the dust. When they hit her late, she pops back up and drops a devastating no-look pass that makes their entire defensive scheme look utterly foolish on national television. The 3-2-point explosion wasn't just a great night shooting the basketball. It was a loud, undeniable, legacy-defining statement that she does not need their permission to completely dominate their league. Her elite mental fortitude has become the ultimate unbreakable weapon against the gatekeepers who desperately want to see her fail. By flat-out refusing to show any signs of weakness or emotional distress, she strips them of all their psychological power. The cold shoulder in the handshake line didn't sting her. It empowered her. It heavily confirmed that they are absolutely terrified of her endless potential, and that realization has only fueled her competitive fire to burn the old record. Booked straight to the ground. But as the grueling season hurtles toward its dramatic climax, the stakes have evolved into an all-out war that threatens to consume the entire basketball landscape. The brewing tension between the Indiana Fever